WTLC AM, W236CR Indianapolis, the home for Indy's favorite gospel music, ministries, community discussions, and more. We are Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM, Indy's inspiration station.
The following is a paid program. The views and opinions expressed are those of the sponsor and do not necessarily reflect the views of Radio 1, WTLC AM 1310, 95.1 FM, and its management. The concerned clergy invite their weekly town hall meeting on Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM.
So at a specific point in time in our political climate when it's absolutely necessary that we have legislators, we have elected officials that will speak to the people and speak on behalf of the people. Well, tonight's Concerned Clergy Radio Show, we're going to have a little dialogue on what happens when you have someone that I'm going to call the city county councilor for Indianapolis now, because he has stood up for Indianapolis for so long. The constituents of Indianapolis have been wanting a voice that would be transparent and would speak out on important issues. Well, here in Indianapolis, the City County Council, the Democrat Party, they have demonstrated that they do not appreciate when you go and speak to the people or speak on behalf of the people. So on tonight's Concerned Clergy Radio Show, we're going to bring in an ousted member, Jesse Brown, who has been speaking on behalf of a few subjects. We're going to have him come in, and he's going to share his side of what he's been going through, just trying to be a voice to the people since he's become a city county councilor. We invite you to be part of the conversation. You can call into the radio station. That number is 317-972-3008, or you can also comment on our Facebook page, Antonio Tony Alexander. You can comment there as well. We'll try to take some of those questions and comments also. Let us pray. Father God, in the name of Jesus, Lord, we ask that you lead us, guide us, and direct us as we have our conversation on tonight. Lord, we know that everything that we do, Lord, we need you. We need you to, Lord, speak to the powers that be, Lord. We need you to lift up the downtrodden, Lord. We need you, Lord, to provide wisdom for those that we elect and put in political office. Lord, we just pray you bless our time on tonight. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Well, I'm Reverend Tony Alexander, and now I'm glad to join you on tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in our guest. Let's go ahead and bring in City County Councilor Jesse Brown. Good evening, Mr. Brown. How are you?
Good evening, Reverend Alexander. I'm doing quite well, despite everything.
Despite everything. And, I kind of took a moment just to at least kind of set the stage for where we're at right now. Councilman Brown, I can say this, ever since you took your seat, it seems like you've been getting your wrist slapped just for speaking on behalf of the people and being a champion for the people on certain issues. And now we find ourselves, when we look from a national stage perspective, we see that a lot of things are going on. We don't see that there's a lot of, I'll say, speaking up on behalf of the nation. When we come here to Indiana, we are a red state. Marion County is one of the few Democrat cities that we have, and Marion County should be the one that should take the lead on a lot of issues in the state, and you've been doing just that. Recently, you spoke out against a message that was sent by other counselors in which they signed off to a letter that was in the recorder regarding charter schools and IPS, that if IPS, quote unquote, did not get itself together, that they would support IPS being turned over to charter schools. So I'm going to stop there and kind of let you maybe fill in some of the gaps, introduce yourself if you want to do that in a different way, and kind of help us understand where we're at. Good evening, Amanda.
Yeah, good evening, Amanda. Appreciate all of your hard work on homelessness issues, especially lately. Amanda and I Amanda helped host a panel that I was honored to sit on recently. Yes, but I think you described it really well. I'm humbled by the way you described me, and I appreciate that. I do represent formally District 13, which is mostly the near east side of Indianapolis. I live in the 46218 zip code. Most of my district is not 46218, but I'm in the very northeast corner, live right at 20th and Riley, which is close to 21st and Emerson. So to your point, I believe that we know that even Democrats within Marion County and Indianapolis have long been charter school supporters. I think our city's Office of Education Innovation is one of the few mayor-sponsored charter school authorizers in the country. We have one of the most pro-charter administrations that have among Democrats for quite some time. And, even running for office, I made it pretty clear I was a big fan of public education. But it was really when my constituents started raising the alarm and asking me to get deeper involved in this issue that I started leaning into it a little bit more. And part of the reason for that is because I don't have kids myself. My wife and I own our home and have some financial stability, thankfully, but no children, at least as of right now. And we were both lucky enough, both of us actually attended Cathedral High School on academic scholarships. This is pre-vouchers, didn't take any public money to do that, but did attend Catholic school. I was not a Catholic at the time. My wife was raised Catholic. But frankly, IPS schools were, frustrating and had a lot of problems. So back in 2000, when I went into high school, that's where we went. I worked for some time, actually for 3.5 years, at a charter school myself at Goodwill Metropolitan High School there in Hawville. And so when I speak out against charter schools, it's not out of ignorance. It's because I know very well exactly how even a great school with a great model can suddenly, turn terrible. And without a teachers union, without strong parent involvement, without an elected school board, there's no accountability that the community has over these schools. So I've long held them in deep suspicion. My wife always makes fun of me because I had a catchphrase. I said, it's a scam and a sham, the charter school industry. Kind of that pithy phrase I'd keep repeating. And it was really when my constituents asked me to push forward and push back against this, letter that you mentioned from my fellow counselors that I really started getting involved. Started working with IPS school board members, asking what they needed help with and what pressures they were feeling. And they made it very clear to me that they felt like the Democratic establishment, or at least the only Democratic politicians who had spoken up on the matter, seemed to be supportive of the charter school industry, and they were feeling pressured to basically give away IPS resources, quote unquote, to stop Republicans from coming out and forcing them to. They let me know in no uncertain terms that Brandon Brown, Mind Trust, Rise Indy, all these groups were heavily involved, both in crafting the legislation at the State House, as well as recruiting these Democratic politicians to push to be the velvet glove as opposed to the iron fist that are both working for the same ends. And so they felt like they needed help. They knew, as I do, that the vast majority of constituents want a strong public education system. And even the parents who feel like they're choosing between bad options likely wish that they had a public school that was fully funded and fully able to help serve the needs of their students. So to me, the whole allowing the frame of the argument to be, well, your options are either the Republicans destroy public education explicitly with a House Bill 1136, or you destroy most of public education or continue down that path that's already been going for over a decade by selling off more IPS resources and giving more things away to charters. And as long as we accept that framing, we're going to see the exact same thing happening as we have seen happening for the last 12 years, which is we slide further and further into charters and further away from well-funded public schools. So I didn't accept that. And quietly, I started pushing back against this narrative and asking constituents, hey, I'm willing to fight for this if you are. If you'll stand with me, I'll stand with you. And together we can try to resist this narrative. And I got overwhelming support for that idea. So typical politician, I'm just talking and talking. I can pause for questions here.
Well, yeah, exactly. Let's take a moment just to also make sure that our listening audience understands that there is no data that supports, number one, that charter schools are providing our students a better education. when you just compare test scores, especially here in IPS or across the board. There's no data that says that you should give all of our students to charter schools because they're excelling, if you would, in the area of education. You're not seeing that. What you're also missing out on from I'll say our public, and Jesse alluded to it, how resources are given to charter schools. I mean, charter schools can buy an unused IPS building for $1. I mean, there are things there that are put in place that are conducive already. Charter schools, they don't have to report, they don't have the same accountability as public schools, but yet we are trying to put them on a pedestal as if they're providing some better level of education. Now, that being said, so the IPS has been going through, I'll say, lots of changes. They've had, they're under the Rebuilding Stronger plan now, if you will. They certainly have a lot of struggles. But I think a lot of the struggles, Counselor, are not coming from within IPS per se. I think it's a lot has to do with this charter movement and how we have diluted the quality education that could be had. As a matter of fact, the same classes that you're promoting with charters, why can't we put those in just a traditional IPS school?
I think that's exactly right and very well said. It makes me think about, we've heard this concept for the last 8 years in particular, really 12 at this point, fake news, right? People always want to talk about fake news, and there's all these distractions and misinformation coming around. And I see charters as being the fake news of the education industry, because they're allowed to provide really misleading statistics without much accountability or oversight at all. And by the time people can dig into it and figure out what's really going on, sometimes the charter has already totally collapsed and students are left looking for another school in the middle of a school year. I know from my personal experience, when I worked as an educator in a charter school, I was teaching with an emergency license. I had a bachelor's degree in cultural anthropology, no formal teacher training. And I was teaching 23 students, 7 different subjects. I had no textbooks, and I was just told, look up the state standards online, make up your own lesson plans to try to teach to those. We don't really have a mentor teacher to give you right now, but I'm sure you'll do great. So I like to think I'm a smart guy. I care deeply about my kids, and I tried my best, but I was absolutely failing those kids, and that's why I left, because I couldn't do that to them anymore. So yeah, I've seen it firsthand. It really is not okay what they're doing.
And let's so out of the blue, we had counselors that signed off on a letter that was published in the Indianapolis Recorder. Those 3 counselors being Majority Leader Maggie Lewis, Pike Township Counselor Leroy Robinson, and Pike Township Counselor Carlos Perkins. Oh, by the way, Majority Leader Lewis is also in Pike Township. So they signed off on a letter pretty much putting IPS on notice if, you don't make changes or, get certain things in place that, they, in my opinion, it was a threat. We're going to take funding, or we're going to make sure that we do allow IPS to be given to charter schools. Now, they did that alongside with former mayors Bart Peterson and Greg Ballard. So here's what's interesting. They signed off on that letter with those 2 former mayors who were very pro-charter. But these counselors are in Pike Township. Right. What if what was it that drove them to lead the charge, and by them expelling you out of the caucus for the reason of you speaking out? Well, did they speak out of turn, or was the caucus in complete agreement that you all were putting IPS on notice?
The caucus was not in complete agreement. And normally I would have to be very careful here about what I said, or what I say tonight, because there is a rule about keeping confidentiality within the caucus. But ironically, my peers have chosen to relieve me of that confidentiality obligation by expelling me from the caucus. So I'm not going to put everybody's business on blast. I still think private conversations can be important for legislators. But I can say multiple occasions over the course of months, I tried to initiate a conversation within the caucus because I knew I'm kind of a crusader against charter schools, but I know not everybody feels that way. And not everybody represents the same district. And so I think it's okay, as always, to have some diversity of opinions and to figure out where we do agree and where we can find common ground. Especially as I saw more and more bills being introduced to the State House, I tried to rally, my colleagues to figure out what do we all agree on? Because if we can have a united front fighting back against the State House, we're going to be a lot more likely to succeed in stopping the bills we all agree we dislike. I can tell you that none of the three counselors who signed that letter responded at all to that conversation that I tried to initiate, and instead went off on their own and worked with Republicans to pass their own public, or to create their own public narrative, I should say. I was pretty frustrated with that. I didn't find that to be acceptable, especially because if anybody read the news last year, I was almost expelled from the Democratic caucus within 2 months of joining as an elected official, because I went to the State House and advocated for the Blue Line rapid transit project, which went right through my district and which was at risk of losing $150 million of federal funding. And I was told that it was totally inappropriate for counselors to go off on their own and take a public position while the State House was in session because these Republicans are too mean. They'll come in and punish us. They'll slap our hands. That's too risky. Don't do it. Whereas my peers appear to have done the exact same thing, except working collaboratively with Republicans, and there's never been a motion to expel them as far as I've seen. So I was frustrated about that. Seemed like a double standard, but I also know the folks who were pushing this, with the exception of Councilor Perkins, have a lot more seniority than me, and sometimes there's some benefit to giving a little more leeway to people you've been around longer. I get that. So again, I was quietly frustrated. Other counselors were encouraging me to push in our kind of text thread that goes around, push for more accountability and more answers about education. And so a couple things came to a head at once. First, there was a proposal 7 at the City County Council that the chair of the Education Committee, Keith Graves, was pushing. It was literally written by Rise Indy, and that almost went to the Education Committee for a vote. And in the format that it would have gone, if people hadn't said anything, would have literally taken money from every new development project that the city sponsored and given it to Rise Indy to administer a fund to help education, which a lot of us had huge problems with. I was always kind of the designated boogeyman, to quote Kendrick Lamar a little bit, but I was always in charge of kind of raising the tough questions in the caucus chat. And multiple times over just the 14 months I've been in the caucus, other counselors would ask me to kind of ask the hard question and take the political heat for it. I've got thick skin, so it didn't bother me. So I was pushing back on that issue politely, but insistently. Simultaneously, I was starting to get messages from my constituents. And now not only were Majority Leader Maggie Lewis, Councilor Carlos Perkins, Councilor Leroy Robinson going off on their own to make a public statement, but my constituents were receiving text messages that said essentially just what you were talking about. It was the implied threat. It said, stop the takeover of IPS schools. It implied that IPS was being mismanaged, had financial problems, and they were going to get taken over by the state unless my constituents signed this or wrote an email, I should say, to the IPS board leaders supporting the plan laid out by the 3 counselors I just mentioned. And it used almost exactly the talking points from their letter. And so, again, privately, I reached out to the counselors and said, hey, my constituents are blowing me up about this. This really bothers me. These are the same talking points that you used in your letter. Can you either tell me, that you are behind this and say, hey, I'll stop texting your constituents the opposite of your message on education, or will you at least deny it? I'm asking you to just say on record, I had nothing to do with this and I don't support it. And all 3 of them gave me evasive answers and would not commit to putting something in writing, not even for me to copy paste and show people, but just to write to me personally as a counselor, no, I did not do this. No, I have nothing to do with it. Yes, you have my permission to push back against this. Instead, I was told, oh, well, you need to have a phone call with me and we could talk about it on the phone. And in my experience, a phone call is a great way to make a commitment that you can't be held to because there's no proof that you made it. I've been accused multiple times of misremembering things when I was told directly, I've never had a problem with my memory ever before in my life, and it's strange that it keeps happening on the council. So I said, no, I really would prefer something in writing, please. My peers said, I'd like to have $1 million, and then laughed at me. And so at that point, I felt I'd done the respectful thing. I'd reached out privately, even though I was very upset. I offered them the chance to explain themselves. They didn't take that chance. So I made a post on Facebook. And what I said was, I suspect that these three were behind this messaging campaign. I asked them privately. They did not deny it. I'm asking them now publicly in front of all of you. That's what I wrote. I didn't assassinate their characters. I didn't, impugn their motives. I didn't say they hate children or anything like that. They just have a different opinion than mine, and they were being evasive about this. And I thought it was important. The next I heard from those three was when I walked into the caucus meeting on Monday, and the very first item, which was not on the agenda, was a move to expel Jesse Brown from the caucus. None of the three said a word during that other than to vote yes, and they voted 13-6 to expel me.
Well, and to that point, the fact that you were, as you said, respectful, you had asked the right questions in the right forum, in the right format, was not getting any answers. And then you come to this caucus meeting, which is interesting, the fact that they were able to get the numbers that they got without really having much of a discussion on this. And I think it lends itself to one of the major issues that we have and why we keep getting our heads handed to us in elections, and why here in the state that Marion County keeps getting trampled on. And that's because we don't have legislators who speak up for us. And the community needs legislators who speak up and out, not just because here's what's very frustrating. We had a lot of things going on earlier in the year, late last year. The only time I remember a big gathering of city county council is when they were addressing potholes. That's the only time I remember, Mr. Brown, where they said, let's get together and we're going to stomp our feet and say we need something better. But when it comes to, everyday livelihood, humanity items where the public needs to be informed, they're ghost.
That has been my impression as well. And, I want to be careful not to seem like, because this is what I was accused of by some of my peers, is that people feel like, I'm it's my way or the highway sort of person, because I will speak up even if I know I'm in the minority on a issue, right? Because I think that democracy actually works best with diversity, which means a diversity of opinions and a diversity of voices. And I think that it's important to hear out the minority argument and allow people to consider it. And even if that doesn't change their mind today with this vote, it gives you a chance to slowly build your majority over time and slowly sway and persuade your colleagues. That is not how the Democratic caucus works in Indianapolis. Agendas are determined behind the scenes by Maggie Lewis by herself. She might take feedback from other people, but it's not like there's a Google Doc where anybody can add suggestions for things they want to talk about. The format is entirely tightly controlled. The caucus finances are privately tightly controlled. We don't get any expense reports or any vision into what is being spent and why and who makes those decisions. All of it is just allergic to democracy, even small-scale democracy among the 19 members of that caucus. I think that on a small scale and on a large scale, what our society needs is the ability to, hash it out, right? Have these big public arguments, which can look embarrassing. It can look, frustrating, and people are going to have to hear multiple sides of the issue. But I think that the arguments and the proposals and the legislation that we come up to at the end of that will be stronger because we've considered multiple points of view.
Absolutely.
But, when you look at the vote count for almost any council proposal over the last 5 or more years, almost every single proposal that goes to the council passes unanimously or with 1 or 2 symbolic no votes. I can't think of the last time I've seen something go up for a vote in front of the council and fail. It's, everybody wants to count their votes ahead of time and everybody wants to whip and try to make sure things go well. But I think we need to embrace having healthy debates And I'm happy, I'm a socialist, right? I'm wearing my little Eugene Debs red flag pin. And I know not a single other counselor would use that word to describe themselves. And so I entered the council knowing I'm going to be on the losing side of some votes. Not everybody's going to share my ideals, and that's okay. I respect that. I'm not trying to convince everybody else to do what I want to do, but I am going to speak my mind and encourage people to think through it.
All right.
That is seen as, antithetical to the way things operate.
Let's do this. We have to take our first break of the hour. Then we're going to invite our president to come and join the conversation as well. But you've been speaking to a huge issue, the fact that we're not having more open dialogue, and the community can't even get to their counselors. I think that's one reason why, you're being embraced, because you are at least listening to the constituents and they see you acting based on what they're telling you. So we're getting ready to go to our commercial break. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, you can call in 317-972-3008. We have a lot of comments going in our Facebook feed. We'll try to toss some of those up as well. But once again, you can call in 317-972-3008. You're listening to the Concerned Clergy Radio Show on Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM, Indy's Inspiration Station.
Wednesdays on TV1.
All my love scattered everywhere.
Desire.
When he looked at me, I just melted.
Dreams so sweet turned into a nightmare.
Betrayal.
But I didn't suspect that he was a straight-out killer demon. I knew I was in trouble.
And murder.
That's the price to pay, just for one man.
For My Man. All new tonight at 9 on TV1.
If we are truly the racing capital of the world, we want our audience to be more reflective of the world around us. And Radio One has been a great partner in helping us do that.
How can a partnership with Praise Indy serve your business?
I'm Michael Kaltenmark, Senior Director of Marketing for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and proud partner and client of Radio One.
Diversity.
Radio One's diverse reach not only allows us to get our message in front of a diverse audience, but then also gets those folks interested as we look to invite more diverse audiences to the track to join us, to let them know that the Speedway is open to them and that they're welcome there. And they've been a strategic partner in helping us achieve that goal.
Deliver your message to the audience that matters.
We've been able to attract an even larger audience and fill the Speedway with more people because of our partnership with Radio One.
Text business to 71007 to take your advertising to the next level.
Radio One's right there with us in the trenches.
Get results with Praise Indy.
Welcome back to the Concerned Clergy Radio Show. I'm Reverend Tony Alexander, and I've got our president with us. We have President Pastor David W. Green Sr. He has joined our conversation that we started at the top of our hour with City County Councilor representing District 13 in Indianapolis, Councilor Jesse Brown. He's been giving his side of the story in regards to what's going on with the Democrat caucus, and why is it that, and these are my words, not his, but why is it they keep telling him to sit down and shut up when we need more voice, when we need more elected officials speaking up and out? Why is it they continue to try to bridle his voice? And he's speaking on behalf of our constituents. Before we bring him back in, and good evening, Mr. President, I'm going to go ahead and we'll take one of our callers. Let's go ahead and bring in Mayhem.
Hello?
Hey, good evening.
Hey, good evening. Good topic. I'm glad that counselor is speaking up, even though we know this has been going on for years. I know he's being polite, but your council has been compromised. They're gatekeepers. This has been going all the way back from the book, Who's Your Heist? They even chased him out of town. Be careful, my friend. A lot of people had lost their lives talking about this. Your friends, they are giving IPS away. They're compromised. They've been paid off. Everybody know it. I know you had to be polite early on that show even that show is compromised. They're all gatekeepers. And you need to get to the public more and let the people know what's going on, because a lot of people don't know what's going on. A lot of people have been shut up. A lot of people have been pushed out of town. But, yeah, the council, all of them, they need to go. They've been compromised. They gatekeepers, and they giving IPS away. Some people know it, but some people gave up the fight. Some people ain't had heart attacks and died over this. So you're doing a good thing, but I got to warn you, get protection, because this city is dangerous. Hey, have a good one.
All right. Thank you so much for listening and calling in. One of the things that we're seeing in our chat few times that's been mentioned is that there's some ties between many in the Democrat caucus and some of these charter organizations such as Rise Indy. Mr. President, since you just came in, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of speak to how when we have our elected officials, you know, when they have those ties, and, you know, we're seeing in the chat where it says that, you know, there's money plus individual contributions that's given to them. It's kind of like a lobbying effort. And rather than speaking up for the constituents, they're speaking up to those that are lining up their pockets, if all of that is true.
Well, first of all, I want to say good evening to UM Alexander, our guest, Councilor Jesse Brown, to our audience. First of all, I want to commend Councilor Brown for taking a stand, for even coming tonight to share with us in the community, because part of the pushback was he was out talking to community leaders. And people don't like that he's talking to community leaders. And when you're in the community, people ask you questions and you're going to be, you know, you want to respond truthfully. He's not leading a campaign in that sense. I mean, he's just, okay, he gets asked a question, he's going to respond honestly. And that can create chaos for those who aren't doing that, who are not availing themselves to their constituents, to the community, or embracing the community. And some of our counselors, that's exactly what they do. Regarding the Rise Indy, Stand for Children, Mind Trust, as we know, that's all funded by billionaires. That's all one group. That's just a three-headed monster of the same monster. And they do give out dollars. This is a group that spent $1 million in the IPS school board race. So they got a lot of things they have, one of which is money. And so that money influences, you know, can lead to corruption and buying votes and buying position that will sell out schools. I agree that IPS is being sold out with Mayhem and others, that's happening. Unfortunately, so many of us don't open our minds to understand that it's not just IPS, it's going to be all public schools, baby. You better pay attention if you're sitting in a township school, not think that this is not going to come your way. And that buying stuff is where people, I'm so proud of the people who were able to show up yesterday at the committee hearing for Councilor Brown, because we're not going to get there until people rise up and say enough is enough. The money side is going to be sending flyers and doing stuff that a honest candidate will not be able to match dollar for dollar. That ain't going to happen when a billionaire is backing these other organizations, multiple billionaires. We as citizens, as community people, though, can say we don't want this anymore, and we're going to stand up and we're going to go vote, and you're going to pay attention to, well, heck, if this person sent me 10 pieces of mail, what's up with that? You know, the job don't pay that much. Who is behind this? There has to be somebody behind it, because the job doesn't even pay that much. And so, you know, we got to wake up as citizens and community people and say enough is enough. And the council won't change with just one counselor. What we need is more counselors like Jesse Brown, who will voice their thing. Not that they're the same thinking as Jesse, but the party has to be willing to entertain different voices. It's crazy how Democrats say we are a big tent. But when you reduce that down, we ain't a big tent, because if you don't comply, they will vote you off the island and set you on the sideline.
It's a little door. It's a little door.
It's not a big tent. I mean, wait a minute. Why? If it's a big tent, it ought to be open to diversity of thought, diversity of ideas. There ought to be diversity in conversation, and that should not equal, well, you ain't marching to the beat, so now we will vote you off the island. And in my opinion, Reverend Alexander, things will not change until you get more, not the people who are marching to the beat, to people who say, I'm there for my community, for my constituents, and I'm going to ask questions, whether it's about IPS and education, whether it's about homelessness, whether it's about healthcare, whether it's about the potholes, the economy, why we building a soccer stadium. Somebody should raise those questions, and it doesn't make them the other party. It doesn't make them a bad person. Their constituents want to know, and they should be able to be allowed to be asked, and that needs to be in the room. Not everybody just checks the box and goes along just to get along, so they can go to the Pacer game or the Colts game. We don't need that anymore. We don't need people who are committed to what's it going to take to be in the mayor's suite. We need people on the outside that's going to, watch TV at home and then say, now I'm going to ask this question. And that's where we got to get to. And for that part, it's on the community. I mean, left on his own, they'll try to take out Jesse Brown in the next election wholeheartedly. But the community can say, no, we don't want that to happen. We want a diversity of voices at the table. Now, not that you agree with everything that Jesse stands for, but at least you're saying we need diversity of thought at the table, not going and saying, well, we're just going to get all the same old people. And the only way you can get on there is if you're going to march along to the beat of what we've been doing. I mean, I just say, take a look at what's going on. Surely we want some things to be different. And you're not going to get different if you don't get some voices at the table, and it has to be more than one, because they will just crucify that one voice. It's going to have to be a half a dozen or so saying, wait a minute here, I'm here and I'm here for my community, and I'm not just going to check the box and go along with something that my constituents think is crazy and I think it's crazy. You have a right to say, explain that. You don't have to start out going public, but you at least got to say, explain that. If they're not willing to explain that, then you need to go public, because that's the only way it's going to have cover.
Pastor, we have to take a break, but I want Mr. Brown, if you can respond at least to the piece where Pastor Green mentioned, and it was mentioned in the chat, that a lot of folks came to support you. If you can just speak to that piece, what that meant, to you and for you as you're going through, this particular season in your political life.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that. And I'll try to be quick and not do the politician answer and keep you here all night for that. But, I sent an email frustrated, just saying, hey, I saw what they did to Ethan Evans last term. And I've seen what they've done. The caller earlier, I think, made some good points. And yes, they do go after people. I know how they work. I'm not blind, right? But I'm not willing to just roll over. I went into this. I quit my day job. I took a $145,000 pay cut so I could better serve the community. I see this as my life's work right now. And so not going away, no matter what. But being removed from the caucus and being removed from committees, which is still what I feel very strongly they were attempting to do yesterday, would have been devastating to my district, because it would have prevented us from being represented and to have a voice on the council in these committees. So I sent an email just asking for help. My hope was maybe 5 or 10 people could find time in their day, 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, to come down to a tiny little conference room designed to discourage the public from being there, even though by law it is a public meeting and the public has every right to attend. And I was so happy to see that nearly 60 people showed up and showed support from all different walks of life. My brothers and sisters from the union movement. I had clergy friends showing up. I had activist community, people who wanted justice in Palestine, who appreciated my work on that issue. People from all different walks of life, and mostly constituents, arrived just to say they found this unacceptable. And from the looks I saw on some of my fellow counselors' faces in that meeting, I think that they were surprised. I think that they had come to believe their own mythology, which was that they were the smartest people in the city. They're the only ones who are actually paying attention to what's going on, and that people will just go along with it. And there's really no reason to try to talk with them. That'll just slow you down. I think the fact that so many people showed up on a moment's notice, snapped into action to stand with me, it's not because I'm some superhero or somebody special. It's just because, as everyone's been saying tonight, that the lack of any kind of opposition or questioning voice is to our city's detriment. And I think many people are starting to see that and realize that, when voices that are dissenting are silenced, that hurts all of us, because it hurts, if even if you agree with the mayor right now, even if you agree with council leadership on this issue, it sets a terrible precedent, because it means as soon as you step out of line, they can squash you. And so this gave me so much hope, so much humble gratitude and love for the whole district. I always, try to lead with love and solidarity, but it really just made me double down on that. And I'm so grateful.
All right. Let's go ahead and take our break. We do have callers that have been holding. We'll take Marvin first when we get back from our break. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, you can call in. That number is 317-972-3008, or you can also comment on our Facebook feed as well. So we'll see you on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Concerned Clergy Radio Show on Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM, Indy's Inspiration Station.
Bringing fresh produce and grocery staples directly to your neighborhood, the Mobile Community Grocery Store fills the gap where traditional stores are absent. Find us tomorrow at Pangea Vineyards, Three Fountains, and Amber Woods. Experience convenient shopping right at your doorstep.
Eric was way behind on his taxes.
I owed a lot of money to the IRS, almost $15,000. I tried to make payments.
The IRS wasn't satisfied with Eric's efforts, so they came after him full force.
They're coming to put a lien and a hold on all my income, my home, my car. I was just overwhelmed at what to do.
Then Eric called Optima Tax Relief.
When Optima Tax got involved, the calls would stop, the threats would stop. It was easy like 1, 2, 3.
Optima's award-winning team of expert tax professionals took care of Eric's problem.
I owe $15,000, and now my debt is clean. I don't owe anything.
Take Eric's advice.
If you have a tax problem, you need to call Optima Tax now.
Call Optima Tax Relief for a free consultation. Call 800-685-5688. 800-685-5688. 800-685-5688.
Optima Tax Relief.
Actual client compensated for sharing their experience. Some restrictions apply. Visit OptimaTaxRelief.com for details.
The IRS finally caught up with Louie.
I hadn't paid my taxes in 8 years.
He was in big trouble.
We're going to take your house, garnish your pay.
Louie found out about Optima Tax Relief, America's #1 tax relief firm.
I don't owe the IRS anymore. It was because of Optima Tax.
Call Optima now for a free consultation.
Give Optima Tax a call. They can help you.
Call 800-811-7033. 800-811-7033.
Optima Tax Relief.
Actual client compensated for sharing their experience. Visit OptimaTaxRelief.com for details.
Listen to the Muskegon Bible broadcast each Saturday morning from 8 to 9 a.m. on Praise Indy, AM 1310 and 95.1 FM, where Willie J. Duncan is the pastor.
Score big savings during Menards Super Sale. Get ready for game day with a 2-pound tub of braided pretzel twists. On sale for just $5.49. Assorted flavors of Sprecher Craft Soda in 16-ounce bottles are only $3.99 a 4-pack. Plus, save big on party tableware, chairs, grills, coolers, small appliances, and much more for game day get-togethers. Check the weekly flyer on Menards.com for all the great deals going on now.
Save big money at Menards.
Welcome back to the Concerned Clergy Radio Show. I'm Reverend Tony Alexander, and I have my president with me, president of the Concerned Clergy, Pastor David W. Green Sr. And we also have as our guest this evening, City County Councilman from District 13, Mr. Jesse Brown. He's been with us since the top of the hour, and he's been sharing what it's like to fight on behalf of the people. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, you can call in 317-972-3008, or you can also comment on our Facebook page. We got Marvin that's been holding for a while. Marvin, good evening.
Good
evening, pastors and Councilman Brown. I just wanted to say, and if you give me just a couple of seconds here, I know you got a lot of people. Councilman Brown, you are the type of Democrat that I think the party, not only locally, but nationally, needs to reconnect to the people. I think the Democrats are going to benefit from the current occupant in the White House, and so we'll see them win a lot of elections, I think, between now and the midterms all over the country. But I think what they'll miss is the reason that they lost. I think it's elitism in the party. And what I've always said, I've never been one to continue to vote for people to hold office for years and years. I've heard people try to explain to me why that can be beneficial, but I think you get comfortable, especially when you're in districts where you're in a heavily Democratic district or even Republicans, as we see at the state. You really can get disconnected from the people. And in regards to IPS, as a big supporter of IPS, a lot of us have seen this effort from within IPS to charterize. I've heard a lot of educators say what the state is doing is kind of different than what we saw IPS doing. But I mean, I'm loving to see you all fighting for IPS, but I don't know that IPS is 100% fighting for itself, because we all have seen the effort, even when my children were in IPS, and I went to a lot of board meetings to charterize that school district. And an educator friend of mine who has said, since Dr. Farabee was superintendent, that the goal is to charterize IPS.
All right.
So I know what the state's doing is a little uniquely different, and that's why I haven't been out there fighting as hard, because I don't think that it's sincere from Dr. Johnson, who I'm going to be frank with you, I never thought was qualified for that position. But, we got all into she's black, she's a woman. Yep. And so, you couldn't say anything. But at the end of the day, Councilman Brown, I think you're the type of Democrat, and we saw you mobilize in just a short period of time. I don't know where it came about that you were going to be expelled, and I haven't heard that history, and I came into the show late. But I just want to tell you to keep fighting. You give me hope. You're an example for Democrats. That the only reason I think the Democrats lost is because the presidency is because they have become disconnected from the people.
All right.
And people have aligned with the guy
Marvin,
that really care about
Marvin,
it. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments. I'm sure Councilor Brown does as well. We got a few callers. So callers, I'm going to ask you if you can. We're at the almost the top of the hour. If you can, make it quick. Let's go ahead and bring in Joyce.
Okay, so mine might be a little bit off topic, but today I went to the bank to deposit $200, and they gave me a receipt for 1 cent. And when I tried to go in and correct it, they gonna hold my money, and they know. But this is interesting. This ain't the first. I went to the gas station, and they charged me more for gas than what a gallon should have been. And and they trespassed me off the land. I'm like, whoa, General Attorney, who needs to assist me?
All right.
This is really nasty. I guess they want. I'm sorry. I'm short.
That's all right. No, just do this. You can leave your info with the engineer, and we'll try to find out who your counselor is, and then they'll be able to maybe assist you. Let's go ahead and bring in Octavia. Octavia.
Hello, Councilman Brown. We had a moment this morning, didn't we? Jesse?
We certainly did. Thank you for your text.
Always. Again, this is a problem bigger than everybody involved. This is a problem with this notion in Indiana that we can privatize something that is constitutionally bound. The only thing the state of Indiana is supposed to fund is public education, and they have used monkey math. What's your word? Milk toast? Jesse used milk toast. I hadn't saw that since I took a philosophy class. So here's the real problem. You've got people who really agree with each other, but they got on the boat at a different time. Maggie Lewis, Jesse Brown, they can make it work. There may be people he can't make it work with, but you're talking about the person who has the Boys and Girls Clubs. You're talking about a man who won his district from an incumbent. What we have to do is focus on the fact that Louis Furby then gave away IPS to the charter school system. Now we have to fix that. So what I love about Jesse and what he means for the future of Indianapolis is that he's got his foot on their necks. So people, every human, every person, you've got to go out there and fight. But it's not because Jesse Brown is against Maggie Lewis. That's not the case. It's that Maggie Lewis has 26 boys and girls clubs, and she sees the failure of education on a regular basis, as does Councilor Brown. So disagreements are fine. But right now, today, we have to undo what Superintendent Sturvey did back in 2013. It's that old. And now it's become comfortable. So what I ask is that people join behind Councilor Brown, but not because he's against the status quo. It's because he's for answers. So again, I appreciate you taking my text today, and I.
All right. Thank you so much for your phone call. I think we lost Octavia. Let's go ahead and bring in a Motef real quick.
Oregoni, gentlemen, thank you for taking my call. I'd just like to say, Councilor Brown, I heard you earlier on Tina's show. I don't like what happened. I think you need dissenting voices. You need different views. That's the problem we're seeing in D.C. Mike Johnson, Speaker Johnson, said he agreed with the president's assessment of annexing and taking over sovereign land from the Palestinians in Gaza. We're talking about the Speaker of the House, the third in line. So that's the problem we already got on one side. So I know what the Democrats are trying to do. The Democrats are trying to out-Republican the Republicans. That's never going to work. That's never going to work. And I disagree with Mark. The Democrats, from being here 60 years, I got a minor in political science. I'm a scientist by trade, lab, but I got a minor in political science. And every report and every interview shows that Kamala faced racism and misogyny. That's what she faced. She got 80% of black males, 96% of black females. She got 78% of Asians, 76% of Jews, 76% of East Indians. Where she lacked that was in the Latinx community and the Arabic community, and white males and white females. So now you add that up and tell us what that is. So we appreciate you, Councilor Brown. I'm going to keep up even more. I'm going to come to a couple of council meetings next week, and I'm going to keep up and make sure that we hold people to the fire, because we got some issues that I just read about with Councilor Perkins. That's my counselor and living in our district. So I'm going to keep up with that, too. I know you heard that, Pastor, haven't you, about him and not living in our district out here in Pike in District 6. So we're going to keep up on that. Thank you for taking my call.
All right. Thank you so much. And before you respond, Councilor Brown, Marvin's comment regarding rushing our callers, I told you we only got a few minutes, and we got a lot of callers. So I appreciate you. Councilor Brown, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, of course, and anybody should always feel free to come up to me and say hello. I try to give my cell phone number and email address out to everybody I meet and encourage people. You know, it's nice to hear people say, oh, you're doing a great job, I appreciate you, but that's not very important. What's much more important is when you disagree with me, make sure I hear from you, because, again, I really do believe what I said. Diversity is a strength and feedback is a gift. I actually used to lead the complaint department at Angie's List, and so it'd be my job to take the most irate callers all day long. And so I read a bunch of books on the topic, and it convinced me that it is a gift to hear directly from people. Because if you think about it, anybody could just talk behind your back or over a beer or something and just say, man, they ain't nothing. You know, they got no idea what's going on. I'll never vote for them. They've lost my support. And you don't get the benefit of learning from them or figuring out what you could do differently to earn their support unless they take the time, go out of their way to reach out to you and tell you about it. And so I always try to appreciate negative feedback. In this case, in response to what's happened this week, at this point, I believe I've gotten 1,000 messages via text, email, Facebook, Twitter, everything else from constituents and supporters. Twitter, there's some trolls on there, I'm not going to lie. But out of all the other platforms, which is probably 800 of the 1,000 messages, 800 of them were in support of me. One person was not. And so who did I go and have coffee with today? It was that one person. Because I don't need a bunch of people to inflate my ego anymore. You can't be in politics without having a little bit of an ego. I'm always asking for God's help and taking care of that. But what I need is to hear negative feedback and what am I doing wrong? What could I do differently? So please always feel free to come up. You can give me a piece of your mind right then and there, or I'll give you my number and you can blast me on my cell phone later when you have time to think about it. So thank you.
Mr. President, one of the things I've said, over the last few years, as I look at how our Democrat Party operates here in Indiana, is that Indiana couldn't handle having a Stacey Abrams, someone who would come out, would speak for the people, on behalf of the people, be willing to stand up to a government structure that, when you look at Georgia, is really keeping them down. We could not, because of what they're doing to Councilor Brown, we would not be able to embrace somebody who could come in and can help us be more progressive in our politics.
No, we're not at a place for that, but it fuels why you can't win a state election, et cetera, because you got to get winning on your mind. You got to be able to entertain diversity of thought and ideas. You're not going to get there if you only think the way I think, and that's the only group working together in a Republican-dominated state. That mindset has to go. That's not a winning mindset. That is not going to work. I mean, you have, as Democrats, we got to be from the most progressive side to the most conservative side and say we're in this together. And if we're going to get winning on our mind, we're going to talk about making a difference. Anything less than that, we're going to have what we have now: the chaos we have in our communities, not solving issues, not solving problems, because a few rich people are making all the decisions. So they view it as not an issue. You're not going to get your pothole roads fixed. You're not going to get, have public education. If a few people say, no, we don't really want that done. We want it to be all charters. And that decision really didn't come by the community. It came by just a few people with money. If we continue down that path, we will see things continue to go from bad to worse. And then you just point fingers and blame other people when we could fix it. And I think that fixing it says, okay, we need 25 people in there with some diverse thought. We don't need everybody in here just rubber stamping some stuff, because these problems, most of which are fixable. That's the thing about it. If you look at the data for most of them, Rem Alexander, they are fixable. We ain't really trying to fix it. Exactly. And that includes public education. We ain't trying to fix it. There's an option to fix it, but we don't want to choose that option. We want this other option over here. And we need to get back to, let's fix the problem, because we can. The resources are in this city to fix almost any of these problems. I don't think any of them are just so overwhelming it can't be fixed. It's the willingness to do it. It's the willingness to entertain different ideas. It only works if, going back to the Octavius thing, then Counselor Lewis has to be willing to talk to Counselor Brown and receive what he has to say. Now, if she ain't willing to receive what he has to say, then you can't get there, because they're not open to the conversation. If you're more committed to, I need to do what this money says do, and I get it. I mean, if Rise Indy gives somebody $100,000, I can guarantee where they're going to vote.
Well, let me say this before I give it to Mr. Brown for a closing comment, Mr. President. Our counselors should take note of a lot of things that were said on tonight. Counselor Brown, he mentioned early on, he couldn't get meetings, he couldn't get answers. That is what we are used to as constituents of this city county council. So I want all of you council members, and I know it's not 100%. We've got one that is an anomaly right here in front of us. But I can tell you, when I call my counselor, it's very seldom that you get a response when you email them. And I hear that so often. Our counselors not only have to be willing to talk amongst each other, but they got to come out and talk to the community. That is not what we're getting. That is what we need. And what we see is you won't talk to us, because we've tried to have meetings with them, Mr. President. You won't talk to us. You won't talk to one another. But then we see things that are being published saying, here's what we're going to do. And black people, y'all need to just take it. With that being said, Mr. Brown, thank you for coming. Give you some last words.
Yeah, appreciate it. I mean, I think we've hit on all the major topics. It's diversity. It's being able to agree with each other and disagree. I said when I was with Pastor Green on Pastor Wayne Moore's morning fellowship last time, my intention is never to afflict the powerful. It's to empower the afflicted. I know that there are peers of mine on the council who feel like I've been a little rough, maybe a little too direct, a little too embarrassing in my comments to them. And I hope the experience of seeing 60 people bum rush a council meeting shows that I'm actually offering a polite and mediated way of trying to deal with frustrated constituents. And, I mentioned this in the Public Works meeting when talking about how badly the snow plow response was this time. I said, really, you need to be working on this plan before there are pitchforks and torches on Lugar Plaza out front of the city county building. And, slightly tongue in cheek, but there's a lot of frustration and upset in our city, in our state, and in our country right now. And I think there's racism and misogyny, as was mentioned earlier, but there's also just people who don't see the systems working for them, and then they get into just burn it down mode. And that is dangerous for all of us. So we need to show people there's a reason to participate in politics. There's a reason to get involved. There's a reason to raise your voice. So I beg of people, I'm happy to continue working. I would still love to be seated on the caucus. I'm still insisting on my fair committee assignments, 6 instead of the 3 that I was always assigned from the beginning. I really appreciate the chance to talk tonight.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us at this late hour, and all of you who joined us as well. We'll catch you on next week's program. Thank you once again for listening to the Concerned Clergy Radio Show on Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM, Indy's Inspiration Station.
You've been listening to the weekly town hall meeting brought to you by the Concerned Clergy in cooperation with Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM. The views and opinions expressed on the town hall meeting are not necessarily the views of Praise AM 1310, 95.1